Oh, okay, that's awesome.
Okay. Sorry for that technical. We're moving over to Apple products, and so this adjustment has been just a little bit. But anyway, so I am was asked to speak about auditing and organizing the MTSS resources. And as I reflected on what to share with you all, I think that one of the main messages that I used with our district team and teachers is that with MTSS, we are organizing the resources and the supports that we have throughout our district. We did not have to invent all new um, interventions and assessments and things like that. We had many things in place, but through developing a strong MTSS system, we were organizing those resources. And so that's one of my recommendations as you're speaking to your teams is, you're not asking them to take on this whole new huge project that you're building something that's not there. Many of our resources are already in place, the RSA screeners and the interventions title and all of those things. So we're organizing that so that we can be truly effective and efficient with the district resources. And so that's one of those main benefits when we're talking about MTSS, being efficient and effective with all of our resources. So, okay, we are going to focus on the purpose and processes for screening, and diagnostic assessments was another topic that we'll discuss, and then looking at available resources and again efficiently allocating those matched to needs. So the first one we're going to talk about are the academic screeners, that universal screening. And I'm going to just go through what we did as a district and just talking through those steps when we first became partners with the State Department through the Otis grant in identifying a screener. We of course had reading screening, and we were looking to expand that for math and expand throughout grade levels. And so with our first steps there is we developed a committee. So we wanted to obtain those perspectives of reading specialists and different teachers in our district, but also obtain more buy-in by having some of those teachers and specialists who would be implementing and actually doing those assessments be a part of that team. And so we created a committee that had district administrators, the school psychologist, reading specialists, and teachers. And that's been something we changed screeners after that, developing that first or deciding upon that first screener, and having that committee of especially classroom teachers who would be doing the assessments. We found that that's really important to have that feedback from the teachers and for them to be able to give us that honest assessment of what they think about that assessment before we make that decision and purchase. So that's definitely important. When we're looking at the needs for academic screening in grades K through 6, one, of course, is cost. That's always going to be a factor with in school districts. So cost is it has to be a priority when you're looking at that. One of the other features that we have looked at in academic screening is looking for a screener that incorporates progress monitoring measures, intervention recommendations, or intervention libraries. We have used, like I said, 2 different screeners, and both of them incorporated progress monitoring measures, and they provide graphs so we can see with that visual representation progress and growth. And they recommend certain interventions and have links to those intervention protocols through libraries. And we found that having that resource saves our team of instructional leaders, coaches, from needing to develop all of those resources. And there are still some that we certainly add to, but having that in place has been really, really helpful. And then definitely it is so important when you're thinking about a new screener, if that is something that you are looking at, you have to build in that time for training. And what we found is it takes a while for teachers to become accustomed to that new screener and ensuring that the administration is done in a valid and reliable way, and the progress monitoring, that just, again, the implementation of that screening takes time. But then the next step is really training your data teams to use those results to plan intervention. So it takes some time and training when you have that new assessment to be able to read the report and to know, okay, when I'm looking at these results, this is indicating that this student has a phonemic awareness need, and these are the interventions that we should hone in on when we're looking at these results. So that definitely, as we took on a new screener, it was through that process of seeing how much training was needed that our district added instructional coaches to help our classroom teachers with the administration and intervention selection and things like that. So through that process of the Otis grant, we were able to see those areas where we needed to build in more supports for our teachers just through that process. Okay. And one of the other things that you have to look at are those barriers to academic screening. And you will always have the different stakeholders have different priorities in what they're looking for in a screener. And that's why I would definitely recommend you have a committee when you're selecting a new screener, and you have people of different roles on those leadership teams at the sites weighing in on that. For instance, when teachers are selecting screeners, much of what they're looking at is the time. This is, taking away from some of that instructional time. So the organization and the time that is required to administer that screener is one of their main priorities. And then with our school psychs, we are often, and administrators, we're looking at how does that screener, how easily can we see progress and growth? Are those progress monitoring graphs easy for us to interpret, to guide our data teams as we are determining, do they need a change in intervention? Do we need to continue with intervention? So those are just a couple of the barriers that we have experienced. And then when we're looking at academic screening in secondary, I think it's important for us to see that the goals are similar. So even though intervention looks different, the data review process looks different, grades 7 through 12 here at Bixby, the goal is still to identify at-risk students who require academic skill intervention. And we have a daily tier 2 intervention time at all of our grade levels. And so we need data to determine which students require intervention. And so this data looks different at the middle school than it does at the high school. And so I'll just share just a little bit of what we do at Bixby. And I'm always wanting to learn more about what other districts do when it comes to secondary. That's the high school is my main site. I should have said that at the beginning. I'm a school psychologist at the high school as my main site. And then I also work as part of my role throughout the district with our MTSS. So in grades 7 and 8, we went through a process of determining what would be the best screener. And one of the conversations that we kept finding is that teachers were asking for a screener that would assess more of the curriculum. And we needed to revisit and explain to the teachers what what an academic screener truly does in identifying reading and math skill needs. So those foundational skills, and not assessing how well they are progressing through their science curriculum. And so that was a conversation that we definitely had with our teams to help them understand that the goal is to identify those students who have reading fluency, reading comprehension needs, and that once teachers, I think, understood that, the value of the screener definitely was more apparent. So they saw, okay, because they would at first say, well, this isn't really assessing what I've been teaching in the same way that a curriculum assessment would. And then in the grades 9 through 12, and just to let you know, at the middle school, we use IXL. And so we do have that academic screener that is utilized in grades 7 and 8. But grades 9 through 12, we use different assessments through grades and behavior and things like that to recognize more of an early warning system that is recommended for high schoolers to identify students who are at risk of not graduating. So, but the key there is explaining that your secondary sites have to have data as well. When we are looking at needing to assign students to intervention, you have to have that data as well. Okay. Oh, here's where I talk more about IXL. So when we were looking at screeners for our middle school, there were some teachers who were already utilizing IXL for instructional purposes, and that we used as something to kind of grab onto. Okay, this is already a resource that teachers see value in, and so we decided to use that IXL at the middle school as our screener. So it has a diagnostic snapshot, and it has national norms now as well. So it is a good benchmark screener, and it also has that intervention and progress monitoring feature as well. So at the 9th through 12th, as I said just earlier, we use the early warning system indicators, similar to those indicators. So grades, credit deficiency, behaviors. We also look at attendance as well as another piece of data that we are using to determine the students in need of intervention. Okay. Okay. And I will say too that one of the barriers to academic screening, when we're looking at the amount of data, when you're talking about the number of high school students and the amount of grades and things like that, there's a lot. There's a lot of data, and we definitely are continuing to fine tune and to problem solve the best way of gathering and organizing that data. And that's something that I help with our administrators and counselors, and we literally just at 1 o'clock today, we're doing our data review meetings and going through and discussing ways to like improve that, streamline that. But it definitely takes dedicated time, allocating or distributing, delegating that task to different team members. I know that some districts have purchased different systems that will integrate data to be able to identify those students who are most at risk based on those factors. And so those are excellent resources, it sounds like, as well. So we have not done that, but that is definitely, I think one of the other things that we're working on in our district is to utilize the resources we have. Like we use Canvas for grades, So it has a feature that identifies the students who are at risk based on grades. So just we're working to figure out ways to use what we have and integrate that into one place so that we can again identify the students who are most at risk based on all of those factors. So it's a work in progress. So when we start talking about the diagnostic assessments, really the difference with a benchmark screener is typically you see that need, that student is at risk, but needing to dive into more specific assessment of that skill need is where we are discussing the diagnostic assessment. And I think what I see as exciting, just looking at the progress that we've made in Bixby, is that in the higher grade levels, even teachers are asking, we need more diagnostic assessment. We need to know exactly what skill to work on during intervention. And that makes me so happy whenever people are asking for more data like that, so that they can make sure intervention is truly tied to that skill need. So that's a good thing. So the goal, again, with universal screening, you want to identify the kids who need intervention and identify the academic skills they're lacking. But sometimes you need a more diagnostic assessment in order to identify that skill need. So, and then after we changed our reading screener K-3, it was during our data team meetings that we were finding that we needed more assessment, more of a diagnostic assessment to be able to identify the specific skills for intervention. And so it was really interesting how through those data team meetings, we kept hearing that feedback, and then we developed a foundational assessment that we used from some of our curriculum to be able to just add to that and guide intervention. Again, it's always great when we're seeing our teachers asking for more, because they want to ensure that they are implementing the right intervention. And then when we look at barriers to diagnostic assessments, again, it's very similar to the one with the screener. We want to make sure that we are hearing from all stakeholders, because they have different priorities. And the time is so important, ensuring that you've selected an assessment that does not require too much time. Because again, that is taking time from instructional time. So that's important. Okay, and talking about interventions and developing an intervention library, this is an ongoing work that we continue to work to improve. But the first step with developing an intervention library, we created a committee who audited existing reading interventions. And again, we had reading specialists and title teachers and school psychs who looked at all of the reading intervention that we had in our drive and first organized those. And we utilized reports from our screening tool to organize our intervention library. And this I highly recommend. We made sure that we used those similar terms so that when a teacher saw in the report this was the skill need, they could match that in that intervention library. And we have our intervention library housed on our staff hub so that all staff can access it. We really work to put everything on our staff hub now, and that has been a really helpful thing. And we really have spent this is a large task to take on, developing that intervention library. And I will say that some of the feedback that we've received just in recent years is that sometimes it's overwhelming to have so many interventions for each skill need. And so many times it's helpful to have just a few for teachers to begin with. And then what we found is having a larger intervention library that instructional coaches and school psychs have that they can go to when a student is not making progress with one of the first or one of the couple interventions that teachers are trained on, then we can go back to those other interventions. But sometimes we began with a more lengthy list and received feedback from teachers that was too much. It was too much to choose from. They felt like they needed to go through all those and select one. And so we certainly have learned that it's better to give a smaller amount and then again have some available that we can kind of a back library that we can select from. We did train our teachers through a jigsaw method. And again, this is an ongoing practice that we always are looking at adding more interventions that we train on. But we had each teacher learn one of the intervention within, like a 5 to 10 minutes, and then go back and kind of demonstrate or teach it to the other team members, so that by the end of that PLC, everyone had some exposure to all, 4 or 5 interventions, but one teacher was sort of that expert who had learned and demonstrated it. And so in that method, we hope to build some, again, experts on each team in those interventions. So I'll show you just a picture of our intervention library that's divided out by skill need. And we developed these slides where you could link, you could click and link these to all of the cards and every bit of the materials that are needed with a demo video. And again, that's a work that we are continuing to improve and work, but it has been a valuable resource to have, especially those little videos, just short little brief videos of what it looks like to implement the intervention. And the quicker the better. Like, it does not need to be a long video, or it's difficult for teachers to watch those. So as I said before, that extensive time commitment definitely is there, but it's, like I said, if you start with just a couple interventions for each one of those main skill needs, that is not as large of a task in developing that intervention library. And I will also say that we continue to explain and teach and train about utilizing evidence-based interventions versus allowing teachers to select an instructional activity. So that is just, I think, an important reminder that we all need when we're talking about intervention, is ensuring that we're using evidence-based interventions. And we have, our instructional coaches have been great to be our, if a teacher is unsure if what they are doing is an evidence-based intervention, they can check with our instructional coaches and they can look to see if that is an evidence-based intervention. It's been a good kind of rule of thumb that we've used with that. Okay, and I wanted to share this awesome resource that is available. I received it from the State Department, and I don't remember exactly when it was or how I received this, but it was just a blank MTSS pyramid that it was geared for secondary, because you'll see it has behavior interventions, academic interventions, social emotional interventions, and then college and career interventions. And this tool was so helpful to me at the high school. When I sat down and we were talking about intervention, I think that we needed this to identify all of the resources that we have, all of the interventions that we have, and to organize it. And so this was what we used at my site. And so I would highly recommend that if you're at a secondary site, to do that. And I can certainly share, again, it's probably somewhere on the State Department website, but it was just really a helpful thing for us to sit down and just organize and see all that we have already. And then we try to set it out. I even printed copies so that during our data team meetings, we have this reminder, okay, yes, these are the interventions that we have available. Let's remember that as we are problem solving what intervention this high school student needs for this to address this need. And so, and this, I made this, and this has definitely changed. We need to update this every year because there are changes in what we have. Like right now we have an academic intervention time 3 times a week. And so, and we have like a mentoring intervention and things like that. So it definitely changes, which it should as we grow. So, but that was a great tool. And that's a great activity, I think, for your secondary site teams to see what you have. And again, to organize that in these tiers. And I think also seeing we don't refer everyone to individual counseling with our Daybreak therapist. That is a tier 3 intervention. So that should be for a small number of students. But there are many students who might respond to a check-in, check-out type mentoring. And so we can accommodate more students through that intervention as a tier 2 support. Okay, I know I'm done with the time. I wanted to open up for questions here at the end. But universal behavior screening is the last topic that I wanted to talk about. And with universal screening for behavior, the goal is to identify the students who need that social, emotional, behavior support, to guide the teams on selecting that research-based intervention. And just to improve ways of monitoring. And this definitely is a need at all grade levels, certainly. And in our district, through the Otis grant, again, to all of that support that we received, we were first tasked with developing a curriculum. So what is our behavior curriculum? And we, through our administrative team, so principals, site principals, developed these expectations. So our school expectations, and they're broken down by elementary and intermediate, and then we have one for secondary students. And these are the behaviors that we teach. These are the expectations that we teach. And this is that tier 1 curriculum that we provide to all students. And the second step is to identify, like, how do we know when a student is not, they're at risk for behavior? We want to identify those problem behaviors that will indicate they're not understanding and not displaying those appropriate behaviors. And so our principals, again, met as a team with our site leadership or our district leadership and developed common minor behavior definitions and major behavior definitions. And those are the ones that we use when we're looking at incidents and assigning consequences and things like that. And the last step was defining those criteria. So this is how we will know that a student is in a level of requiring tier 2 intervention for behavior. If they have 2 to 3 majors in those first 2 months or across 2 months, 6 to 7 minors, or a specific referral. So we developed these specific criteria that, again, the principals and our district administrators worked on this and kind of developed this consensus of these would be the criteria that would indicate a student needs intervention for behavior. And then the behavior pyramid that we developed a couple years ago has the links to that behavior curriculum, that tier 1 curriculum. So our expectations, and then what we use as a screener, which is our office referrals for major and minors, and then the decision rules for sorting our students into tiers. And I will tell you that we continually are explaining to our teachers how important it is that they enter the incidents in our system. We use Educator's Handbook so that we can screen for students in need of intervention, and we have accurate data. to be able to make decisions about behavior, not just for our individual students, but things like our principals look at it to determine, do we need extra supervision on the playground? Educator's handbook will show if there are a lot of incidents, at recess or things like that. It helps us solve and prevent many problems by being able to review behavior data and look for trends, which has been so helpful. And again, we worked really closely with the Otis grant team to develop all of that. And then I think it's important when you're thinking about screening for behavior. Some of the things that we have done, create behavior expectation videos, and we need to redo those. Definitely, that's again a work in progress, but we did create some little videos that showed students displaying those expected behaviors, the way they walk down the hall, the way they get on the bus, and things like that. And then many, we also implement conscious discipline with our early childhood grade levels, and grade expectations is our district-wide climate and positive behavior system. And so just things like that have been important in helping us establish those expectations. And then definitely you are always training staff in how to teach behavior expectations and how to identify majors and minors. I know I was talking to a principal just the other day, and she said at a faculty meeting, they brought in several behavior incidents that they literally got from their office referral system and asked teachers, would you identify this as a major or a minor? And it was really interesting to hear teachers, and if they didn't agree, like why they thought that was a major or why they thought that was a minor, but to recalibrate what is a major and what is a minor, to ensure that we are all consistent in entering that. And again, that's definitely a work in progress, teaching that and reviewing that. And again, explaining the importance of entering that data. Okay. And so again, some of those barriers is identifying the behavior consistently. So some staff will input those majors or minors, and some do not. So just again, as much as we can, getting that consistent buy-in from the staff to do that, and providing tier 1 behavior instruction. I know I did a brief training with the high school teachers at the beginning of the school year and just talked to them about that. Even high school students need to know the expected behaviors in your classroom, because your classroom may be a little different than the next class that they're going to go to. They have 6 teachers throughout their day. And so if you don't spend the time at the beginning on teaching what's expected, that you will spend it later on throughout the year and just responding and correcting. So you will spend the time on behavior one way or the other. It's either at the beginning and teaching that expected and going through those procedures, or in correcting and responding. So, and then just the time commitment, definitely training on behavior intervention is just an ongoing need that I think we all are definitely trying to develop more in our behavior intervention library to address behavior. So, okay. So I wanted to open up for some questions and discussion. I did include a couple questions here, just to ask you. And maybe these are more like food for thought, and then I'll open up to allow you all to ask any questions that you have. But, just think through, I don't know at what point you are in your MTSS implementation, but think through who should be involved in those decisions and who should be on your team, and how do you obtain more involvement from site administrators in the process of auditing and allocating those resources. I think that's another great question to think through. How can you do that? And then how do you deal with differing team members' opinions about screeners and interventions? And again, listening to different stakeholders and, valuing their input, but then also, someone has to make that recommendation and that decision. So those are all things to think through as you're looking at allocating resources. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up now for you all to ask me any questions. I realize we only have 5 minutes left. I was trying to save 15 minutes, but I did not do that well. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up and allow you all to ask questions. And we'll share the slides. I know some of you said that you were a little bit late joining, and that's no problem. We can share the slide presentation. So what questions do you all have for me or for each other when it comes to auditing and organizing your MTSS resources? I know it's Wednesday afternoon and we've probably been dealing with all kinds of things throughout our day. So sometimes it's difficult to have like a question in mind. If you think of something and would like to reach out to Wendy or I, feel free to do that. And we will try to, or I will try, I'm sure Wendy can get answers, but definitely let us know. This process of needing to use what you have in your district and determine those a more efficient way. I know as part of my role, and I sit with each of our site principals, is looking for even personnel that they have available who could be like a check-in, check-out mentor, or do a reading intervention with students, trying to help them see and identify staff who they could use for even just a portion of their day. I think those are things we need to do to be able to use all the resources we have. Okay. I will share my presentation, and Wendy, that blank pyramid that's for secondary that has
I'm going to track that down. Okay. I'm sure we have it somewhere. I thought it was fantastic. And I appreciate especially the message that implementing MTSS is not buying a program. You do not have to buy additional things. It's leveraging what you have and putting those things to use in the best possible ways, and seeing where your weaknesses are. If there are resources that you need to purchase, you'll have a better idea of which ones they are and how to best utilize them, so that you're not just buying lots of different things and everybody has 15 screeners and we're not using those in the best possible ways. So, and I especially liked when you mentioned bringing in your teachers and doing the major and minors. I think that would be really interesting to see. Because everybody, you try to make it as least subjective as possible, but behavior is always subjective in some ways. So anyway, being able to align those and like you say, calibrate as much as possible, I think is fantastic. I appreciate you being with us today.
Absolutely.
And sharing your information. Bixby's doing a phenomenal job. I'm so glad that you all are such a great example of MTSS and working through that process of creating such a great system and sharing what you've learned with us today. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all of your help.
And like Stephanie said, feel free to reach out to her, or for me, I put my contact information in the chat. If you have any questions on the presentation today or just on OK MTSS in general. And our next community of practice is going to be November 20th. It's a week early because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And Kim Hastings out of Edmond Public Schools is going to be our speaker for that community of practice. I hope everybody has a fantastic week and everyone stays safe for Halloween tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you.